"Get out of the car right now," the officer yelled, gun already drawn. I was being arrested for hit and run, a felony that could destroy my entire life. Somewhere in this city, my daughter was celebrating and laughing triumphantly, certain that I would take the fall for the crime she committed. I didn't resist, didn't explain as if I had accepted my fate, but what they didn't know was that their overconfidence was their biggest mistake. Thank you for being here. If that opening pulled you in, drop a comment and share what city or country you're listening from. It means more than you know. Please remember, parts of this narrative are creatively enhanced for dramatic effect. Any similarities are unintentional, but I hope the emotions and themes leave you with something worth thinking about. Turn off the engine. Drop the keys out the window. Do it now. The voice cracked through the night, sharp and amplified. Red and blue lights strobed my rearview mirror. I froze, hands still gripping the wheel of my Honda Accord. I turned the key. The engine died. I rolled down the window and let the keys fall onto the pavement. The metal clinked, the only sound in the world. Step out of the vehicle. Keep your hands where I can see them. I opened the door. December air hit my face. It was 10:05 p.m. I'd been driving home from work, Turner Financial Solutions, where I'd stayed late finishing a reconciliation report. Routine. Ordinary. Safe. Until now. Two officers approached. The one in front, broad-shouldered, mid-30s, stepped into the streetlight. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Marcus Reed with the Atlanta Police Department. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." I didn't ask why, I just did it. The cuffs closed around my wrists, cold and sharp. My shoulders pulled tight. I kept my breathing steady. Panic wouldn't help. Logic would. "You have the right to remain silent." Officer Reed said, his voice flat. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights?" "Yes?" My voice came out calm, steadier than I felt. He guided me to the patrol car. The back door opened. I ducked inside the seat, hard and slick. The door slammed shut. The space smelled of disinfectant and something sour. The cruiser pulled onto Peachtree, heading west. 20 minutes to Zone 2 precinct. 20 minutes to figure out what the hell was happening. I ran through the possibilities. A mistake. A warrant I didn't know about. Mistaken identity. But the way Reed had looked at me, not confused but certain, told me this wasn't random. They thought I'd done something. My wrists throbbed. I shifted, trying to ease the pressure, and the memory hit me. 3 days ago. The Capitol Grill, white tablecloths, expensive wine, soft jazz playing in the background. My daughter had invited me, said she wanted to reconnect. I should have known better. She'd smiled across the table, her engagement ring catching the candlelight. Her fiancé hadn't come some work thing, but she'd talked about him all night. About the wedding, the Buckhead penthouse, the life she was building. "I want you to be part of it, Mom," she'd said, touching my hand. "I know we've had our issues, but I want to move forward. Don't you—" I'd nodded, I'd smiled, I'd believed her. When the check came, she waved me off. "I've got it, Mom, my treat." I'd hugged her goodbye in the parking lot, driven home thinking maybe things were going to be okay between us. Now cuffed in the back of a cruiser, I realized how stupid I'd been. Because my daughter didn't do anything without a reason. And whatever that reason was, I was about to find out. The car slowed. Through the partition, I saw the precinct ahead, low, flat fluorescent lights spilling through glass doors. Zone 2, West Midtown. Officer Reed opened the door. Cold air rushed in again. "Let's go, ma'am." I stepped out, legs stiff, heart pounding. He placed a hand on my shoulder and steered me toward the entrance. The glass doors slid open. Fluorescent light flooded my vision. A phone rang somewhere. A radio crackled with static and voices. A woman behind the desk glanced up, then back at her computer. No curiosity, just another arrest on a Tuesday night. Reed guided me down a hallway. The walls were beige. The floor tile gleamed under harsh overhead lights. We stopped at a metal door. He opened it. Inside a small room. A metal table bolted to the floor. 2 chairs. A camera mounted in the corner, red light blinking. "Sit," he said. I sat. He removed the cuffs. My wrists ached. I rubbed them, trying to get the blood flowing again. "Someone will be in shortly," Reed said. Then he left. The door clicked shut. I sat alone in the fluorescent hum, staring at the mirror on the opposite wall. Whatever they thought I'd done, whatever my daughter had set in motion, I was going to prove them wrong. I had to, because I was 58 years old and I'd spent my entire life cleaning up other people's messes. This time I wasn't going down for one I didn't make. The interrogation room was smaller than I'd imagined. 4 gray walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs that looked like they'd witnessed 1,000 confessions. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a flat, sterile glow that made the air feel thinner. I sat with my hands folded on the table. The cuffs were gone. Officer Reed had removed them before closing the door, but my wrists still ached where the metal had bitten in. Across from me, the detective settled into his chair, mid-40s, graying at the temples, tired eyes that had probably seen every version of this scene before. "Ms. Harrison," he said, opening a manila folder. "I'm Detective Robert Hayes, Atlanta Police Department. I appreciate your cooperation tonight." I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. "We're here because of some serious charges. I want to give you a chance to tell your side of the story. Does that sound fair?" "Fair." I almost laughed. "Miss Harrison." "I'm listening," I said. Hayes leaned back in his chair. "Do you understand why you're here?" "No." "You don't have any idea?" "None." He studied me for a moment, weighing my answer, wondering if I was lying, wondering if I was scared. I wasn't scared, not yet, but I was running through every possible scenario in my head the way I always did when a balance sheet didn't add up. What had I missed? And then, without warning, the memories surfaced. 12 years ago, it had been June, early summer. The kind of heat that made Atlanta feel like it was sinking. David had been gone 3 months, passed away from a stroke no one saw coming, and I was still trying to figure out how to breathe without him. Rebecca had been 20, a junior at Georgia State. She'd moved back home after the service, and I'd wake some nights to the sound of her crying through the walls. She'd needed me. And then the call came. Meridian Capital Group, a Fortune 500 financial firm based in New York. They'd been courting me for months, back when David was still alive, back when I'd been a rising director at Turner Financial Solutions. Chief Financial Officer. $350,000 a year, $2 million in stock options, a corner office in Midtown Manhattan. I'd sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where David and I had cooked Sunday dinners, and listened to the recruiter lay it out. "We need someone like you, Barbara. Someone who understands the market." I'd looked across the table at Rebecca. She sat there in one of David's old Georgia Tech sweatshirts, eyes red, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. She'd needed me, so I'd said no. I stayed in Atlanta, stayed at Turner Financial Solutions, making $78,000 a year, stayed in the same small apartment in Virginia Highland, close enough to drive Rebecca to campus when she couldn't face the bus, close enough to answer the phone at 2 a.m. when the grief got too heavy. I'd chosen her. And for a while, maybe a year, maybe 2, I'd thought I'd made the right choice. But sitting in that interrogation room with Detective Hayes watching me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve, I wondered if Rebecca had ever known what I'd given up, or if she'd even cared. "Miss Harrison," I blinked. Hayes was leaning forward now, elbows on the table. "I asked if you'd be willing to cooperate." I met his eyes, steady, calm. "Tell me what you think I did." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the folder and pulled out a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a driver's license. Georgia, my name, my photo, expired 2 years ago. He slid it across the table. "This was found at the scene of a hit and run tonight," he said quietly. "Peachtree in Piedmont, 9:14 p.m. A mother and her 2 kids were in the car that got hit. She's in the ICU right now. Critical condition." I stared at the license. My hands didn't shake. My breathing didn't change. But inside, something cold settled into my chest, because I hadn't carried that license in 2 years. I'd given it to someone else. Hayes continued. "The 911 call came in at 9:47. A woman, your voice, Ms. Harrison, saying she'd hit someone and panicked." He paused. "So I'll ask you again. Do you want to cooperate?" I looked up at him. And then I said the only thing I could. That wasn't me. Hayes didn't blink. He just slid another document across the table, an incident report with too many boxes and not enough space for the truth. Let me walk you through what happened tonight, he said. 9:14 p.m. Peachtree in Piedmont. A Honda Odyssey was stopped at a red light. Driver was Emily Rodriguez, 34. Her 2 kids in the back, Isabella, 9, Miguel, 7. He let that sit. An SUV ran the red. T-boned the Odyssey on the driver's side. Emily's in the ICU right now. Broken ribs punctured lung internal bleeding. The kids watched their mother get pulled from a crushed car. I kept my face blank. Hayes tapped the report. The SUV fled, but it left something behind. He pulled out the evidence bag again, my expired license. This was wedged between the passenger seat and the center console. Your license, Ms. Harrison, found in the vehicle that nearly ended a woman's life. I said nothing. Now an expired license isn't proof on its own, so we kept digging. He pulled out a transcript. 9:47 p.m., 30 minutes after the crash. A woman called 911. Gave your name. Want to hear it? He pressed play on a digital recorder. Static. Then a voice. Female, shaky, breathless. I hit someone. I didn't mean to. I panicked. I just kept driving. The dispatcher. Ma'am, what's your name? A pause, then Barbara Harrison. And where are you now? Home. I'm home. I don't know what to do. Click. Hayes set the recorder down. That's your voice. We ran analysis. 92% match. I tilted my head. 92% isn't 100. Close enough for a jury. I didn't respond. The voice was close. Too close. Whoever made that call had studied me. But it wasn't perfect. The cadence was off. The panic too performed. Hayes slid another photo across the steering wheel, a swab marked with an evidence tag. We found DNA on the wheel. Yours. Fingerprints on the door handle. Also yours. I looked up. That's impossible. I was home. Then how did your DNA get there? I don't know. Hayes leaned forward. Ms. Harrison, I've done this job for 20 years. Most of the time, people are lying. But every once in a while, someone tells the truth, and the evidence still points at them. So I'm asking one more time. Were you driving that SUV? No. Do you know who was... I hesitated, just for a second. I have an idea, I said. Then tell me. Not yet. His jaw tightened. A woman is fighting for her life. 2 kids watched their mother nearly pass away in front of them. If you know something... I do, I said. But I need to prove it first. Prove it. Hayes laughed, humorless. You're sitting in an interrogation room accused of a felony. The evidence says you did this. Your license, your voice, your DNA. Unless you've got something that says otherwise, he leaned back, crossing his arms. You're getting charged with felony hit and run, leaving the scene of an accident, causing serious bodily injury, and reckless endangerment. And if Emily Rodriguez doesn't make it, we add vehicular manslaughter. The room went quiet. I looked at him, at the exhaustion in his eyes, the assumption I was guilty because the evidence said so. And for the first time all night, I smiled. Not big, not warm, just the faintest curve at the corner of my mouth. Because I knew something Hayes didn't. I knew exactly how to prove him wrong. Give me my phone, I said. Hayes frowned. Excuse me. My phone. You took it when you brought me in. I want it back. Ms. Harrison, that's not how this... Give me my phone. I said again, calm and steady, and I'll prove it wasn't me. Hayes stared at me. His jaw worked. He was weighing it, whether I was bluffing, whether he should humor me, whether any of this was worth his time. Then slowly he stood. Wait here. He walked to the door, opened it, stepped through. The door clicked shut. I sat alone in the fluorescent glow, hands folded on the cold metal table, and I smiled again. Because whoever had set me up tonight, whoever had stolen my license, faked my voice, planted my DNA, had made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. The door opened. Hayes stepped through, holding my phone like evidence he wasn't sure he should hand over. He set it on the table. 5 minutes, he said, and I'm watching everything. I didn't answer. I just picked it up. The screen lit, my lock screen, the Chattahoochee River at sunrise. I entered my passcode, 6 digits, muscle memory. Hayes leaned forward, arms crossed. Skeptical. I opened the health app, tapped heart rate. The screen filled with a graph read peaks and valleys tracking my day. I zoomed in, 9 p.m. to 9:30. Here, I said, turning the phone toward him. 9:05, 62 beats per minute. Resting. I was home. Hayes squinted. That doesn't prove anything. It does. If I'd been driving, if I'd been in that crash, my heart rate would have spiked. Adrenaline, panic. I would have been at 90-100 beats per minute minimum. I scrolled. 9:14, the exact moment of the crash. 61 beats per minute. Still resting, I said. Still home. I scrolled again. 9:20, 58 beats per minute. Light sleep. The watch detected it. I was a sleep detective, not driving, not fleeing, asleep. Hayes straightened. You could have left the watch at home. I'd been waiting for that. If I wasn't wearing it, there'd be no data. The Apple Watch tracks heart rate continuously, but only with skin contact. If I'd taken it off, the graph would show nothing. No readings. Just a gap. I held up the phone. But there's no gap. It tracked me all night because I was wearing it. At home. Hayes was quiet. I could see doubt creeping in. Location data. I said, swiping to another screen. The watch has GPS. I pulled up the map. A blue dot sat fixed on the same spot for hours. Virginia Highland, my apartment. 1320 North Highland Avenue. I didn't leave. Not at 9, not at 9:14, not at 9:47 when that call was made. Hayes stared at the map, then looked up. You're telling me someone stole your license, drove a car registered to your daughter's fiancé, faked your voice, and planted your DNA? Yes, that's a hell of a setup. It is. And you expect me to believe that? I expect you to follow the evidence. Real evidence, not planted evidence. Hayes exhaled slowly, thinking, calculating. All right, let's say you were home. That still doesn't explain how your DNA ended up on that steering wheel. Someone put it there. That's elaborate. It is. Why would anyone go to that trouble? I didn't answer. Because the answer involved my daughter. Because it meant admitting the person I'd sacrificed everything for had tried to bury me. Check the car, I said. What? The SUV, the Mercedes. It has telemetry, real-time data, speed weight, GPS, everything. Hayes tilted his head. How do you know that? Because I've been in that car. My daughter's fiancé, Christopher Blackwood, he owns it. Rebecca borrowed it months ago when her car was in the shop. I helped her set up the app. That was true. She'd asked me to help with the Mercedes Me app. She'd smiled, said thank you, hugged me. And I'd logged in with my phone. I'd never logged out. I swiped to the app. The Mercedes icon, a 3-pointed star, I tapped it. A map loaded. A black Mercedes-Benz GLE 450 appeared parked at the impound lot on Memorial Drive. I scrolled to the telemetry log, data from tonight, time-stamped, precise. Here, I said, sliding the phone across. Hayes looked down. I watched his face change. The color drained. His jaw tightened. His eyes scanned the data once, twice, like he'd misread it. But he hadn't. What is that? He said quietly. I leaned back. That, I said, is proof. Hayes pulled the phone closer, his eyes narrowing at the screen. Numbers, timestamps, data he didn't understand yet. I leaned forward and pointed. That's the telemetry log from the Mercedes. It syncs automatically to the cloud through the OBD2 system, onboard diagnostics. Every car made after 1996 has it. This one just happens to report everything in real time. Hayes looked up. What am I looking at? Weight, I said. Vehicle weight. The GLE 450 has sensors in the suspension. They measure load, driver, passengers, cargo, everything. I scrolled to 9 p.m. Here, 9:05. The car was parked. Total weight 5,240 pounds. Hayes frowned. So the curb weight of a Mercedes GLE 450, that's the weight of the vehicle with no one inside, is about 4,950 pounds, which means the person sitting in the driver's seat added 290 pounds to the total. I let that sink in. Now look at 9:14, the moment of the crash. I tapped the screen. Same reading. 5,240 pounds. The weight didn't change, I said. Same driver, same load. The passenger seat was empty. You can see that here in the sensor readout. No one else in the car, just the driver. Hayes was still frowning, but I could see him working through it. The driver weighed approximately 290 pounds, I said, but that includes clothing, shoes, maybe a phone or wallet. Strip all that away, and the person behind the wheel weighed somewhere between 160 and 180. I paused. I weigh 132 pounds, detective. I'm 5'6". There's no scenario where I add 290 pounds to that car. Hayes straightened. He didn't say anything, but his jaw had tightened. The math doesn't work, I said. Physics doesn't lie. Whoever was driving that SUV was significantly heavier than me. Then who? Check the registration, I said. Hayes pulled out his phone. A few taps. His screen lit up with DMV records. Vehicle owner, he read aloud. Christopher Blackwood, Buckhead address. He looked up. Your daughter's fiancé. Yes. And he weighs... I don't know, I said. But I know my daughter does. Hayes waited. I met his eyes. Rebecca weighs 168 pounds. The room went still. Hayes stared at me. Not with suspicion anymore. With something else. Realization, maybe. Or disbelief. You're saying your daughter... I'm saying the weight matches, I said. I'm saying the car belongs to her fiancé. I'm saying my expired license was in that car. I'm saying someone made a 911 call in my voice 30 minutes after the crash. And I'm saying I was home, asleep, with data to prove it. I paused. Now you tell me, detective. Does that sound like a coincidence? Hayes didn't answer. He was thinking. Hard. I could see the gears turning. The case he'd thought was open and shut was coming apart in his hands. Why? He said finally. Why would your daughter do this? I didn't answer right away. Because the answer hurt. Because the answer was 12 years of sacrifice, $148,000 in bailouts, and a CFO job I'd walked away from. Because the answer was love that had been weaponized. I don't know, I said quietly, but I'm going to find out. Hayes set his phone down. He rubbed his face with both hands, exhaling slowly. All right, he said. Let's say I believe you. Let's say someone set you up. That still doesn't explain how they got your DNA on the steering wheel, or your fingerprints, or... The phone logs, I said. What? I swiped to another screen. Call history, timestamps, numbers. Let me show you the phone logs. Hayes looked down, and his face changed again. I swiped to another screen. Call logs. Rows of timestamps numbers. I'd dialed numbers that had called me. But I wasn't showing him my calls. I was showing him the absence of one. The 911 call. I said, you told me it came in at 9:47 p.m. Hayes nodded. That's right. Check your dispatch records. Find out what number it came from. He frowned. We already know it was... Check it, I said. Hayes hesitated, then pulled out his laptop. A few keystrokes. His screen lit up with the dispatch log from tonight. He scrolled to 9:47 p.m. His eyes scanned the entry, then stopped. 404-555-147. He read aloud. Registered to Christopher Blackwood. I didn't move. Not my number, I said quietly. Not my phone. Not my voice. Hayes looked up. The voice analysis. Was close, I said. 92%, but not perfect. Because it wasn't me. He stared at the screen, then back at me. Where did the call originate? I asked. Hayes clicked through the metadata. Cell tower triangulation puts it Buckhead. Zip code 30305. Christopher's address, I said. His penthouse is on Peachtree Road, 32nd floor. Hayes was quiet. I live in Virginia Highland, I continued. Zip code 30306, east of Midtown. That call didn't come from my apartment. It came from his. Hayes closed the laptop slowly. I could see him putting it together, the license, the SUV, the fake call, the planted DNA, all of it pointing back to one place, Christopher Blackwood. And Rebecca. 3 nights ago. I said Rebecca invited me to dinner, the Capitol Grill. She said she wanted to reconnect, that she was sorry for how things had been between us. I paused the memory, sharp and bitter. She was charming, warm. She talked about the wedding, about how much she wanted me to be part of her life again. And then near the end of the meal, she asked to see my wallet. Hayes frowned. Why, she said she liked it, said it looked new. I handed it over. She held it for maybe 30 seconds, admired the leather, handed it back. I exhaled slowly. I didn't notice until tonight, but my old driver's license, the expired one I'd kept in the back pocket, was gone. Hayes didn't say anything. She took it, I said. Right there at the table, while I was sitting across from her, thinking maybe we could fix things, thinking maybe she'd changed. My voice didn't break. I didn't let it. She stole my license. She and Christopher used it to frame me. They drove his SUV, planted the license in the car, called 911, pretending to be me, and somehow got my DNA on the steering wheel. How? Hayes asked. How would they get your DNA? I don't know, I said, but I'm going to find out. Hayes leaned back in his chair. He looked exhausted, frustrated, and for the first time tonight uncertain. Ms. Harrison, he said carefully, what you're describing is elaborate. It's conspiracy. It's premeditated. It's the truth, I said. But why would your daughter do this to you? I didn't answer right away, because the answer was too big, too painful. Because the answer meant admitting I'd spent 12 years raising someone who wanted to destroy me. I don't know, I said quietly. But that was a lie. I knew exactly why. Hayes rubbed his temples. Even if everything you're saying is true, I can prove it, I said. He looked up. How? I picked up my phone again, swiped to a different app, a small icon, a blue circle with a white camera in the center. Nest Cam. Hayes frowned. What is that? Live feed, I said, from Christopher's penthouse. His eyes widened. You have a camera in his apartment. I do. That's illegal. I don't care, I said. I tapped the feed. The screen went black for a moment. Then it loaded. The screen filled with soft light. A living room came into focus. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline furniture that probably cost more than my entire year's salary. Marble floors. A chandelier that caught the light like scattered diamonds. Christopher's penthouse. And sitting on the cream-colored sectional wine glasses in hand were Rebecca and Christopher. Hayes stared at the screen. What is this? Live feed, I said, from inside the penthouse. How did you... 2 weeks ago, I said Rebecca invited me over. She said she wanted to show me the place, that she was excited about the wedding and wanted me to see where they'd be living. I paused. I went. I smiled. I told her how beautiful it was, and while she was giving me the tour, I installed a camera. Hayes looked at me. You what? A Nest Cam, I said. Small, wireless. I hid it on a bookshelf in the living room. She never noticed. Miss Harrison, I knew something was wrong, I said quietly. I didn't know what, but I knew. The way she'd been pulling away, the way Christopher looked at me like I was expendable. I just wanted to know what I was dealing with. Hayes exhaled slowly. That's illegal surveillance. Georgia is a one-party consent state. You need permission from at least one person in the conversation to record. You weren't part of that conversation. No, I said, I wasn't. Which means anything on that feed is inadmissible in court. It's fruit of the poison tree. A defense attorney would tear it apart. I don't care. Hayes frowned. You should. A woman is in the ICU right now. I said, my voice harder than I intended. Emily Rodriguez, 34 years old. 2 kids who watched their mother get pulled from a crushed car. And you want to argue about the legality of a camera I installed in my daughter's home? Hayes didn't answer. You told me I was a suspect, I said. You told me the evidence pointed at me. I just proved it didn't. I proved I was home. I proved the weight was wrong. I proved the call came from Buckhead, not my apartment. And now I'm about to prove they set me up. I held his gaze. So you can arrest me for illegal surveillance later. But right now, detective, you're going to listen. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Hayes looked at the phone, then at me. Then slowly he leaned forward. Turn up the volume, he said. I tapped the screen. The audio icon brightened. At first there was nothing, just the ambient sound of the apartment, the faint clink of glass on glass. Then voices. Muffled at first, distant, but clear enough. Rebecca's voice, light, almost laughing. I can't believe it actually worked. Christopher's voice, deeper, amused. I told you it would. I know, but still, the license, the call, the whole thing, it's insane. It's thorough, Christopher said. That's the difference. Rebecca laughed again. A sound I used to love, a sound that now felt like a knife. Hayes was frozen, staring at the screen. I didn't move. I just watched my daughter, 32 years old, the girl I'd raised, the girl I'd sacrificed a career for, sitting on a couch, worth more than my car sipping wine, talking about how they'd framed me. Do you think she knows? Rebecca asked. The question hung in the air. Christopher's response was cut off by static just for a second, but Hayes was already reaching for his radio. I didn't stop him. I just sat there watching the screen, watching my daughter, and I listened. Christopher's voice came through the speaker, clear and cold. She has no idea. The cops probably have her in cuffs right now. Rebecca laughed. The kind of laugh I used to love, bright, genuine, but this wasn't that laugh anymore. Good, Christopher said. She deserves it. She does, Rebecca agreed. She took a sip of wine, set the glass down. She's always been so mediocre. You know. Christopher leaned back. What do you mean? I mean she had chances. Real chances. Did you know she turned down a CFO job once Fortune 500 New York, $350,000 a year, plus stock options worth $2 million? Christopher raised an eyebrow. And she said no. She said no, Rebecca said. Because of me. Because I was 20 and sad and couldn't handle the fact that Daddy was gone. She said it like it was a joke. Pathetic, Christopher said. Right, Rebecca laughed again. She chose to be mediocre. She could have had a corner office, a penthouse in Manhattan, a career people actually respected. But instead, she stayed in Atlanta, stayed at some boring job making $78,000 a year, living in that sad little apartment. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. And now she'll pay for it, Rebecca said. The words hit like a fist. I didn't move. My hands shook, but I kept the phone steady. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't blink. I just stared at the screen, at my daughter, at the person I'd given up everything for. She chose to be mediocre. I'd chosen her. I'd chosen her over Manhattan, over $350,000, over a career that would have changed my life. I'd chosen her because she'd needed me, because she'd been broken and grieving and 20 years old. And this was how she saw it. Beside me, Hayes had gone still, his jaw clenched, his hands fisted on the table. He was staring at the screen with fury I could feel. He believed me now. Christopher shifted forward. Once she's convicted, we file for conservatorship. Rebecca tilted her head. You think that'll work? It will. She'll be deemed unfit. Criminal record, vehicular assault, hit and run. The court will grant us control. And then we get the retirement fund. $420,000 plus life insurance $500K. Rebecca smiled. And the wedding! Still on. She'll pay for it, one way or another. God, Rebecca said. She's so stupid. She actually thought I loved her. The room went cold. Christopher's expression didn't change. She's expendable, always has been. Rebecca nodded. I stared at the screen, at her face, the face I used to kiss goodnight. The face I'd worried over, the face I'd seen graduate start college bury her father. And I realized something. I didn't know her. I'd raised her, loved her, sacrificed for her. But I didn't know her at all. Hayes moved. His hand went to his radio. But I didn't stop watching. I needed to see this. Every word, every smile, every dismissal of 12 years of my life. I needed to remember. How long do you think it'll take? Rebecca asked. Not long, a few months. Once the trial's over, once she's convicted. Rebecca exhaled. I can't believe we actually pulled this off. We did. They clinked their glasses together. A toast. To my destruction. I watched. I listened. I did not move. If you're still here, comment still here. So I know you're walking this with me to the very end. And if you were in my position hearing your own child speak about you that way, what would you do? Would you forgive, confront, or walk away for good? A gentle note before we continue: some elements in the next part have been heightened for storytelling and reflection. If this isn't something you wish to keep listening to, you're free to step away here. Christopher leaned forward, his voice dropping into something clinical, businesslike. Conservatorship gives us full control, he said. Her retirement fund, $420,000, plus the life insurance policy, $500K. That's $920,000 total. Rebecca's eyes brightened. And the wedding? Still on, Christopher said. Your mother's paying for it, one way or another. Rebecca laughed, sharp, delighted. $1.2 million for a wedding she won't even attend. Exactly. God, Rebecca said, shaking her head. She's so stupid. She actually thought I loved her. The words didn't land like the others. They didn't hit like a fist. They opened me up, like a knife sliding between ribs. Clean, precise, straight to the center. I felt my chest crack open. Not metaphorically. I felt it. The air left my lungs. My hands started shaking. The phone trembled in my grip, but I didn't let go. I couldn't. I had to keep watching. I had to see all of it. Tears blurred my vision. I blinked and they fell. Hot, silent. I didn't wipe them away. Christopher's voice continued distant now, like I was hearing him through water. "She's expendable," he said. "Always has been." Rebecca nodded, sipped her wine, smiled. And I realized something. She meant it. This wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. It wasn't even cruelty for cruelty's sake. She genuinely believed I was worthless, that I'd always been worthless. That choosing her, giving up New York, giving up $350,000, giving up a corner office, and a life that could have been something had been a mistake. My mistake. Evidence of my mediocrity. Not sacrifice. Stupidity. I thought about the last 12 years. The $45,000 I'd paid for her DUI lawyer. The $68,000 in credit card debt I'd cleared. The 8 months I'd let her live with me after she lost her job. The 2 a.m. phone calls when the grief got too heavy. The Capitol Grill dinner 3 nights ago when she'd smiled and hugged me and told me she wanted me in her life. When she'd stolen my license. $148,000. 12 years. A career I'd walked away from. And she thought I was expendable. Beside me, Hayes moved. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loud against the tile floor. His hand went to his radio, his voice sharp, controlled. "This is Detective Hayes, Zone 2. I need a unit dispatched to 3350 Peachtree Road, Northeast Buckhead. 32nd floor penthouse unit. Suspects in custody for vehicular assault, hit-and-run conspiracy to commit fraud, and filing a false police report. I need them now." A crackle of static, then a voice. "Copy that, detective. ETA 14 minutes. SWAT en route." Hayes clipped the radio back to his belt. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me. And I knew what he saw. Tears on my face, hands shaking. A 58-year-old woman sitting in an interrogation room at 11:30 at night, watching her daughter plot her destruction. His expression softened. "Ms. Harrison," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the screen. On Rebecca. On the girl I'd raised. The girl I'd loved. The girl I'd chosen over everything. "Don't be sorry," I said. My voice was steady. Calmer than it should have been. "Just arrest them." Hayes nodded once. Firm. "I will." I wiped my face with the back of my hand. The tears kept coming, but I didn't care anymore. Let them fall. Let Hayes see. Let the whole world see. Because I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't ashamed of loving her. I was ashamed of her. On the screen, Rebecca and Christopher were still talking, still laughing, still toasting to a future built on my ruin. And I sat there in that cold, fluorescent room with a detective who'd believed the worst of me an hour ago, and now looked at me like I was someone worth protecting. I felt my chest crack open, but I did not cry. Not yet, because crying meant it was over, and it wasn't over. Not until I watched them pay. Hayes was still on the radio, his voice low and clipped, coordinating with dispatch. I heard pieces of it, exigent circumstances, Lev confession, suspects unaware, but the words felt distant. I sat in the chair, hands folded, staring at the phone screen. Rebecca and Christopher were still talking, still laughing, still sipping wine. Hayes clipped the radio back and sat across from me. "Ms. Harrison," he said quietly. "The confession on that feed gives us probable cause, exigent circumstances. If we wait for a warrant, they could destroy evidence, flee. The law allows us to act immediately. You understand?" I nodded. I didn't care about warrants. I just wanted it to end. But it wouldn't end. Not really, because even after they were arrested, convicted, sentenced, I'd still be the woman who raised a daughter who wanted her destroyed. The memories came all at once. Rebecca at 5, pigtails, gap-toothed smile, holding my hand at the zoo, pointing at the elephants, laughing. Rebecca at 10, the school play. She'd been a tree. I'd sat in the front row, clapping so hard my palms hurt. Afterward, she'd run into my arms. "Did you see me, Mom?" Rebecca at 20. David's funeral. Her face, pale eyes, red hands shaking. She'd looked at me and whispered, "I can't do this without you, Mom." And I'd stayed. I'd turned down Meridian Capital, turned down $350,000, turned down stock options worth $2 million, turned down New York, a corner office, a career I'd spent 15 years building, because she'd needed me. 1 year later, the DUI, 2 a.m. Fulton County Jail. I'd driven down in my pajamas, written a check for $45,000. She'd cried in my car, promised it would never happen again. I'd believed her. 2 years later, credit card debt, $68,000, designer clothes, trips to Miami, bottles of wine that cost more than my rent. She hadn't apologized, just asked if I could help her out. I'd emptied my savings. Then the job loss. She'd moved back in, 8 months on my couch, eating my food, using my water, complaining about how small the apartment was, never once saying thank you. $148,000. 12 years. Everything I had. And she thought I was expendable. The sob broke free before I could stop it. Then another. My chest heaved. My hands shook. I pressed them flat against the table, but it didn't help. The tears came fast, hot, choking. "I gave her everything," I whispered. My voice cracked. "Everything." Hayes didn't move for a moment. Then softly, "You did, Miss Harrison," and she threw it away. I couldn't look at him. I just stared at the table, at my hands, at the tears dripping onto the metal surface. "You're free to go," Hayes said. "All charges dropped. I'll have the paperwork ready within the hour. You can walk out right now." I looked up. My face was wet. My eyes burned. "But if you want," Hayes continued gently, "you can stay. You can watch. When SWAT gets there. When they make the arrest." He paused. "It's going to be hard, watching your daughter get taken into custody, seeing her in handcuffs. Are you sure?" I wiped my face with the back of my hand. My breath was uneven, but I steadied it. "Yes," I said. Hayes watched me, then nodded. "All right." He checked his watch. "SWAT ETA 4 minutes. I turned back to the screen. Rebecca and Christopher were still there, still oblivious, still celebrating. And I sat there, tears drying, hands trembling, heart shattered, waiting. Because I needed to see her face when they came. 11:50. The screen flickered, then movement. The penthouse door exploded inward. Not a knock, not a warning, just a crack like thunder. And then black-clad figures poured through the doorway. SWAT. Hands up, Atlanta police, don't move. The commands came sharp, overlapping a wall of sound that filled the living room. Rebecca screamed. The wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor, red liquid spreading like a stain. Christopher stood, his face draining of color. He looked toward the hallway, toward the bedroom maybe, or a back exit, and took a step. He didn't make it 2 feet. An officer tackled him from the side, driving him down onto the couch. Christopher's arms were wrenched behind his back, and I heard the metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut. Officer Marcus Reed. I recognized him from the night he'd arrested me. Rebecca was frozen on the other end of the couch, hands raised, tears already streaming down her face. "Don't hurt me," she sobbed. "Please don't hurt me." Officer Brandon Scott approached slowly, calmly. "Ma'am, put your hands behind your back." "I didn't do anything." "Hands behind your back, now." Rebecca complied, still crying. Scott cuffed her, his movements efficient, professional. Hayes' voice crackled through the phone speaker. He was on the line with the on-scene commander reading the charges. "Rebecca Harrison and Christopher Blackwood, you are under arrest for vehicular assault, hit and run, leaving the scene of an accident causing serious injury, filing a false police report, conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." Christopher struggled against the cuffs. "You can't do this. We have rights. This is a legal search, and you have the right to remain silent." Officer Reed said, his voice flat. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you." And then Rebecca's eyes found it. The camera. Tucked on the bookshelf behind a framed photo, small and black and barely visible unless you knew where to look. Her face changed. The tears stopped. Her mouth opened. "Mom," she whispered. Then louder, "Mom, you—" I leaned forward. Hayes held the phone up so the speaker faced the laptop screen. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady, cold. "I did." Rebecca's face crumpled, not in grief, in rage. "You spied on me, I protected myself," I said. "From you." She lunged forward, but Officer Scott held her back. "You can't do this," she screamed. "You can't." But I could, and I had. Christopher was being hauled to his feet, now still shouting about lawyers and lawsuits and violations of his rights. The door opened again, and a man in an expensive suit rushed in, late 50s, silver hair briefcase in hand. Gregory Foster, Christopher's attorney. He took one look at the scene and stopped. "Don't say anything," he told Christopher. Then to Rebecca, "Not a word. I'll meet you at the precinct." But it was too late. They'd already said everything. On camera, in front of me, in front of Hayes. Hayes ended the call and looked at me. "Emily Rodriguez was upgraded to stable an hour ago," he said quietly. "Her family's filed a civil suit, $1.8 million in damages." I nodded. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel vindication. I just felt tired. On the screen, they were leading Rebecca and Christopher out of the penthouse. Separate officers, separate paths. Rebecca was still crying, looking back over her shoulder at the camera. At me. I didn't look away. I watched as they disappeared through the doorway. Watched as the SWAT team cleared the apartment. Watched as the screen went dark. Hayes stood. "It's over, Miss Harrison." I stood too. "No," I said quietly. "It's just starting." He didn't argue. I picked up my phone, my purse. My keys, the ones Officer Reed had taken from me hours ago, now returned. Outside, through the precinct windows, I could see 2 police cars pulling away. Lights flashing red and blue against the night. Rebecca in one, Christopher in the other. I watched the lights disappear into the darkness, and then I walked out. The night air hit me like a slap, cold, sharp. December in Atlanta, the kind of cold that sank into your bones. I stood on the precinct steps, Hayes beside me, holding a manila envelope with my belongings inside. My phone, my keys, my wallet. He handed it to me. "Ms. Harrison," he said quietly, "I'm sorry for doubting you, for putting you through this." I looked at him. His face was tired, lined. He looked older than he had 2 hours ago. "You were doing your job," I said. "Still," he said, "I should have listened sooner." I didn't argue. I just nodded. "Your daughter will stand trial." Hayes continued. "Christopher, too. The charges are serious. Vehicular assault, conspiracy, filing a false report. They're looking at years, real time." I nodded again. I couldn't speak. If I spoke, I'd break. Hayes pulled a business card from his jacket pocket. "If you need anything, character witness, testimony, anything, call me." I took the card. "Thank you." "Take care of yourself, Miss Harrison." I turned and walked toward the parking lot. My Honda Accord sat alone under a streetlight covered in dew, looking small and tired. I unlocked it, slid into the driver's seat, and closed the door. Silence. For the first time in hours, I was alone. I started the engine, pulled out of the lot, turned onto the empty street. It was 12:15 in the morning. Atlanta was asleep. The roads were empty. The stoplights cycled through their colors with no one to see them. I drove slowly. 30 miles an hour in a 45 zone. Christmas lights blinked on the houses I passed, reds and greens and whites strung along roof lines. They blurred in my peripheral vision. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want music. I didn't want noise. I just wanted silence. But the silence didn't help, because in the silence I could hear her voice. She chose to be mediocre. She actually thought I loved her. She's expendable. Always has been. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I thought about Rebecca at 5. Pigtails and gap-toothed smiles. The way she used to run to me after kindergarten, arms wide, shouting, "Mommy!" Rebecca at 10. The school play. The way she'd glowed under the stage lights. Rebecca at 20. The funeral. The way she'd clung to me and sobbed. And Rebecca tonight. Sitting on a cream-colored couch in a penthouse, sipping wine, laughing about how stupid I was. Where did I go wrong? When did she stop being my daughter? The light ahead turned red. Ponce de Leon and Moreland. I stopped. And then without warning, the sob came. Deep, raw, ugly. I doubled over, my forehead pressed against the steering wheel, my hands shaking my chest, heaving. I couldn't stop. The tears came fast and hot. My whole body shook. I gasped for air, but it wouldn't come. I raised a monster. I gave her everything and she became a monster. The light turned green. I didn't move. A car pulled up behind me, a gentle honk. Not angry, just a nudge. I wiped my face with my sleeve, sucked in a breath, and pressed the gas. 12:40. I turned onto North Highland Avenue, my street. 12:50. I pulled into the parking lot behind my building, found my spot, put the car in park. And then I just sat there. The engine ticked as it cooled. My hands rested on the wheel. My eyes stared straight ahead at the building. Second floor, third window from the left. My apartment. The light was on. I'd left it on this morning when I'd gone to work. Inside were Rebecca's childhood photos, the ones I'd framed and hung on the wall. Her baby shoes in a shadow box, the quilt her grandmother had made her. Her room, I'd kept it exactly the way it was when she'd moved out, like a shrine, like she was someone worth remembering. I sat in the dark car staring at the door, and I didn't know if I could walk through it. I turned the key, the door opened, I stepped inside. The light switch was where it had always been. I flipped it. The overhead light flickered on harsh and yellow, flooding the small space. My apartment. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. A kitchenette with a 2-burner stove and a refrigerator that hummed too loud. A couch I'd bought secondhand 8 years ago. A coffee table with water rings I'd never bothered to sand out. $1,100 a month. It wasn't much, but it had been mine. I closed the door behind me and locked it. The click echoed in the silence. I set my keys on the counter, my phone, my purse, and then I saw it. The photo. David. It sat on the shelf beside the TV in a wooden frame I'd bought at a craft fair years ago. He was smiling in the picture. 35 years old, maybe. Before the gray hair. Before the stress lines. Before the stroke that ended him at 48. I picked up the frame. My hands shook. 12 years. It had been 12 years since I'd found him in our bedroom, collapsed on the floor, one arm bent at an angle that wasn't right. I'd called 911. I'd done CPR. I'd screamed at him to wake up, but he hadn't. The funeral had been small, just Rebecca and me and a few of David's co-workers. Rebecca had been 20. She'd stood beside me at the graveside, her face pale, her eyes red and swollen, and she'd gripped my hand so tightly I thought my bones would break. "I can't do this, Mom," she'd whispered. "I can't do this without him." And I'd said, "You won't have to. I'm here." 3 months later, the call from Meridian Capital came. Chief Financial Officer, New York, $350,000 a year, $2 million in stock options. I'd sat at this very table, phone in hand, and looked across the room at Rebecca. She'd been sitting on this same couch wearing one of David's old sweatshirts, staring at nothing. And I'd said no. I stayed for her. I set the frame down carefully and looked at David's face. I whispered. I tried so hard. My voice cracked. "She needed me. You would have wanted me to stay. I know you would have." I paused. "But I couldn't finish. I just shook my head. I pulled my phone from my purse. The screen lit up. 47 missed calls. 31 from Rebecca, 16 from Christopher. I'd blocked both numbers an hour ago sitting in Hayes' office while he processed my release paperwork. But there was one text I hadn't seen. Linda Cooper, my co-worker, my friend. "Barbara, are you okay? I heard something happened. Call me." Sent at 8:45 p.m. hours ago. I typed a reply. "I'm alive. I'll call you tomorrow." Sent. I set the phone down and walked to the couch. I sat. Then I lay down, curling onto my side, pulling the throw blanket over me. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I started to drift, I heard her voice. She chose to be mediocre. She's so stupid. She's expendable. I opened my eyes, stared at the ceiling, the crack in the plaster I'd been meaning to fix for 3 years. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. The hours crawled by. I replayed everything. The arrest, the interrogation, the evidence, the live feed. Rebecca's face when she realized I'd been watching. The look in her eyes. Not guilt. Rage. At 4 a.m., I got up and made tea I didn't drink. At 5 a.m., I sat by the window and stared at the dark street below, and then slowly the sky began to lighten. Gray, then pale blue, then streaks of pink along the horizon. 6:15 a.m. The sun rose. I watched it through the window, my hands wrapped around a cold mug, my body exhausted but my mind too sharp to rest. I had survived. But I was not the same. I would never be the same. And I knew sitting there in the pale morning light that I had to decide, forgive her or let her go. I didn't know which one I could live with. 6 months later, I sat in a small cabin in Boulder, Colorado, watching the sun rise over the Flatirons. The mountains were quiet. The air was thin and cold and clean. And for the first time in months, I could breathe. I'd moved here 4 months ago, early retirement. Turner Financial had offered a severance package, and I'd taken it. Packed up the Virginia Highland apartment, donated most of what I owned, drove west. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, except Linda Cooper, my coworker, my friend. She'd visited once 2 months ago and brought news I hadn't asked for but needed to hear. Rebecca had been sentenced. 9 years, Georgia State Prison, hit and run causing serious bodily injury, vehicular assault, conspiracy, filing a false police report. Parole eligible in 9 years. Christopher got 7, separate facility, aiding and abetting. He'd tried to cooperate, tried to pin everything on Rebecca, but it hadn't worked. They'd both gone down. The civil suit had gone through, too. Emily Rodriguez had filed for $1.8 million in damages. The court ruled in her favor, jointly liable. Rebecca and Christopher would be paying it off for the rest of their lives. Wage garnishment, asset seizure. The wedding had been canceled. The Blackwood family had disowned Christopher, cut him off completely. And Gregory Foster Christopher's expensive lawyer had dropped Rebecca the moment she couldn't pay his $650 an hour fees. Public defender instead. Linda had told me all of this while sitting at my kitchen table drinking tea, her face carefully neutral. "How do you feel?" she'd asked. I'd thought about it. "I don't know," I'd said. I'd paid $148,000 over 12 years to raise Rebecca, bailed her out, covered her debts, sacrificed a career, and she'd repaid me with a prison sentence. For herself. There was irony in that, but I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. I'd started volunteering 3 months ago, a victim advocacy nonprofit here in Boulder. They ran support groups for accident survivors, people whose lives had been shattered by someone else's choices. I facilitated one of the groups, mothers mostly, mothers whose children had hurt them. I understood them. It helped, not in a way that fixed anything, but in a way that made the days easier. Linda had asked me if I'd visited Rebecca in prison. I'd said no. "Are you going to?" "No." "Why not?" I'd looked at the mountains. "Because I had to let her go," I'd said. If I didn't, she'd take the rest of my life, too. Linda had nodded, hugged me goodbye, driven back to Atlanta. I hadn't heard from Rebecca until today. The mail had come an hour ago. I'd walked to the mailbox and pulled out the usual a utility bill, a flyer, a postcard, and an envelope, prison mail. Georgia Department of Corrections, return address Women's Facility in Metro Atlanta. Inmate number 2547893, Rebecca Harrison. I'd stood there holding it. I could see the handwriting through the thin paper, slanted, messy, desperate. "Mom, I'm sorry, please." I'd walked back to the cabin, set the envelope on the kitchen table, made coffee, sat down, and stared at it. She wanted forgiveness, or maybe she just wanted money, or a character witness letter for parole. I didn't know. And I realized I didn't need to know. I stood, walked to the desk by the window, opened the drawer, and placed the letter inside, unopened. Maybe one day I'd read it, maybe not, but today I chose myself. I held the letter. I did not open it. I sat by the window, the unopened letter on the table beside me, and watched the light change over the mountains. The snow on the peaks glowed pink in the morning sun. The sky was endless and blue, and the silence, the deep, clean silence of this place pressed against me like a blanket. I'd learned something that night in the precinct. Something I should have learned years ago. Love without boundaries is not love. It's self-destruction. I thought about all the times I'd said yes when I should have said no. All the times I'd bailed Rebecca out, covered her mistakes, absorbed her chaos into my own life, because I thought that was what mothers did. I thought about the CFO job. $350,000 a year, $2 million in stock options, a corner office in Manhattan overlooking Central Park, a career people spent their entire lives chasing. And I'd said no, because Rebecca had been 20, because she'd been grieving, because she'd looked at me with red, swollen eyes and said, "I can't do this without you, Mom." So I'd stayed. I'd stayed in Atlanta, stayed at Turner Financial making $78,000 a year, stayed in a one-bedroom apartment that cost $1,100 a month, stayed small, stayed safe, stayed close, for her. And then a year later, the DUI, $45,000 for a lawyer, money I'd saved for a decade gone in a single check. 2 years after that, the credit card debt, $68,000, designer clothes and trips to Miami and bottles of wine she couldn't afford. I'd paid it. Then the job loss, 8 months on my couch, eating my food, using my utilities, never once saying thank you. I'd let her, because I'd thought that was love. I'd thought unconditional love meant no limits, no boundaries, no lines you didn't cross. I was wrong. Unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional access. It doesn't mean erasing yourself to make room for someone else's dysfunction. It doesn't mean lighting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. I understand that now. I looked at the drawer where I'd placed the letter. Rebecca's handwriting slanted and desperate. "Mom, I'm sorry, please. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. I can forgive the 20-year-old girl who lost her father and clung to her mother because she didn't know how to survive alone. I can forgive the child who needed me, but I cannot reconcile with the 32-year-old woman who looked at a camera, sipped wine, and called me mediocre, who laughed about how stupid I was, who planned my destruction with the man she was going to marry. I can forgive her pain. I cannot reconcile with her choices. Maybe one day I'll read that letter. Maybe one day I'll visit her, sit across from her in a prison visiting room separated by plexiglass, and listen to whatever she has to say. Maybe. But not today. Today I choose myself. I stood and walked to the window. The flatirons rose against the sky, sharp and ancient and unmovable. Snow blanketed the valleys. The air outside was so cold it would burn my lungs. And I loved it. I am 58 years old. I turned down millions of dollars to raise my daughter. And if I could go back, if I could stand in that kitchen 12 years ago, phone in hand, looking at Rebecca's grief-stricken face, I would do it again, but I would do it differently, with boundaries, with self-respect, with the understanding that love does not mean the erasure of self, that sacrifice does not mean surrender, that being a mother does not mean being a martyr. I closed my eyes and took a breath. I am free. Not free from the pain, not free from the memories, not free from the knowledge that my daughter tried to destroy me, but free from the obligation to fix her, free from the belief that her choices are my responsibility, free from the need to set myself on fire to prove I love her. I opened my eyes. The mountains were still there. The sky was still blue. The world had not ended. I turned from the window and picked up my coat, pulled it on, grabbed my keys. I had a shift at the advocacy center in an hour, a support group for mothers, women whose children had hurt them, stolen from them, abandoned them. Women learning what I had learned, that love can be fierce and still have limits, that you can grieve someone who is still alive. That letting go is not the same as giving up. I stepped outside. The cold hit my face sharp and clean. I locked the door behind me. And I walked toward my car, toward the work, toward the women who would understand, toward a life I was building, one boundary at a time. I sit here today 6 months after that night in the interrogation room, and I ask myself, when did love become a weapon used against me? For 12 years, I believed that being a good mother meant sacrifice without limits. I believed that unconditional love meant erasing my own needs, my own dreams, my own future. I turned down a career that could have changed my life. I emptied my savings. I gave everything. And my daughter used it to destroy me. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, if you've sacrificed for someone who only takes, who only demands, who never says thank you, please don't be like me. Don't wait until you're sitting in a police interrogation room accused of a crime you didn't commit to realize that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's self-destruction. I've learned that family drama stories like mine are more common than we admit. We don't talk about them because we're ashamed, because we think we failed. But the truth is, sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. And that's not our fault. I've heard so many grandma stories and mother stories in my support group, women who raised children alone, who sacrificed careers and dreams and entire lives only to be abandoned or betrayed. These family drama stories don't always have happy endings, but they can have peaceful ones. I've also heard grandma stories of strength women who, like me, learned to say no, who learned that you can love someone fiercely and still protect yourself, who learned that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. And I've shared my own story with other mothers, adding to the collection of grandma stories that teach us the hardest lesson: sometimes loving someone means letting them go. My lesson boundaries are not walls. They're bridges to self-respect. God gives us the capacity to love deeply, but He also gives us the wisdom to know when love has become harm. I believe He wanted me to survive this. Not just survive, but to help others do the same. So here's what I want you to take from these family drama stories from my experience. Love your children. Love them fiercely. But do not erase yourself in the process. Do not sacrifice your dignity, your future, your soul. Because when you do, you teach them that you are expendable. And one day they will believe it. I made that mistake. Don't make it too. Thank you for walking this journey with me to the very end. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you found yourself in my situation? Facing betrayal from someone you'd sacrificed everything for your perspective means everything to me. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. A gentle note. While this narrative draws inspiration from real-life dynamics and social themes, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this content doesn't resonate with your preferences, feel free to explore other stories that might suit you better. But if it did resonate, if you've lived through your own version of these painful family drama stories, know this: you are not alone. You are not expendable. And you deserve peace. I found mine. I hope you find yours too.